Exactly.
The poem I Like Your Hat does, of course, take place on a very cold Glasgow day, as becomes clear. I like your hat. At the bus stop, where the wind's trying to kill us, slicing in like a scimitar from Siberia, a tiny woman is wearing a colourful velvet beret. She's so small, I see each segment of its circle sitting on her head like the wheel of a stained glass window. Emerald, sapphire, saffron, indigo, amber, red. She beams when I say it's beautiful, tells me its story, a gift from her daughter years ago. She deemed it too bright, too loud, stuffed it in a drawer out of sight. And now her daughter's dead. Years later, the bus stop on St. Vincent Street. Maybe it's the same wind slicing in from Siberia, snow and ice spitting through its sharpened teeth. A young woman says, I love your hat. It's a berry of sorts, mulberry wool. Well, cool, she says, unusual. It's from a charity shop, I reply. Then she admires my scarf, hand woven in India, fair trade. And while the bus doesn't come, we talk recycling, pollution, climate change. And I see she's carrying an art portfolio under one arm, while on her shoulders she bears the future of the world. And I swear, her smile's so beautiful, this student girl I've never met before. She's lighting up the shelter like an angel in a holy grotto, as all around the drear November dusk descends black as the wings of ravens. And the glow from her face warms me more than my woolen kind of berry, or my hand-woven fair trade scarf, or best thermal underwear from Marks and Spencer, or my specially lined duvet coats as worn by explorers to far Antarctica, guaranteed to keep me warm at -50 in a hurricane. And as we chat, I recall the tiny lady's velvet beret, its jeweled wheel of colours, and her sadness. As she said, she wore it now to please her daughter, who is dead. And all the while, the darkness deepens as if the sky is leaking sin, and the east wind, with its icy breath from Siberia, does its best to kill us and cuts like a scimitar through the warmth of our common humanity.
So beautiful, Maggie. I adore this poem so much. And you set the scene, this Glasgow scene, a Glasgow winter, which of course is my favourite time in Glasgow. And the whole idea of the, you know, our common humanity, that's a theme through the book, of course. And I was going to ask you, you know, how did you come to write this poem? You know, what was it, a line that, was it the conversation in the bus stop that triggered the poem, or was there another aspect to it that got you writing the poem?
Well, in a way it was really the first one struck me, and this is what tends to happen with me with poems. An everyday life instant strikes you, and obviously speaking to the first lady, she was, you know, one of these tiny little ladies, and I have this habit of talking to people. It's Glasgow, you know.
It's Glasgow, isn't it? Well, that's right. It's very Glasgow.
And then buses and the bus stops, suddenly you've got a whole bit of somebody's life story. And it happened, little lady, and the hat, it was a Kangol berry, by the way. I got that detail as well, but didn't go in the poem. It really struck me, obviously. I was deeply moved, and there's been quite a lot of instances like that, and it sticks with you. And I suppose because you're a poet or you're a writer, you store it away somewhere. And I didn't in fact, do anything, because the first instant on its own didn't quite make it up. And then the second instant, when the young woman then said to me, I was
Mm-hmm.
the older woman,
Yeah.
and then I thought, and the young woman, when I say she was beautiful, well, I don't mean she looked like a model. That's not what I mean at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was just her youth and this beauty of just being this beautiful innocence. And
Mm.
she was, because of the charity shop and the fact that my scarf was fair trade, we got on to ecology and all sorts. And she was so passionate
Mm-hmm.
about the environment, and it was just that whole thing, and something clicked in my head, and I thought, these two instants go together, and
Yeah.
that's where you get a poem, when there's
Yeah.
something and you think these two things go together, and that's where your work starts, because
Yeah.
you think, how do I find the right, how do I hit the right note, how do I find the right tone to start that, and make
Yeah.
sure, I mean, one of my worries is always, how do I not mess this up?
So is that how you would typically sit down? You'd have the idea and you're thinking, this is a great idea. How do I not mess this up? Is that how you would approach
Yeah,
it?
there is a bit of that. I mean, I was the same when particularly, especially when I think there's something special, particularly
Mm-hmm.
special. I was the same with washing Hugh McDermott's socks. I had the idea for years with that one, and I just thought, if I start the poem wrong, if I go off on the wrong foot, I might never be able to get it right,
Yeah,
because
I know what you mean. It's kind of like, I know what you mean. So if you don't take that sort of solid first step in the direction of the poem that you think you want to write, it may never happen.
it's almost
It's,
like being on the right wave. I
yeah.
always think, if you get that right wave, if you get the rhythm of those first lines right,
Yeah.
then you'll go all the way through. And there's also the thing about, I had, actually, you and I were speaking on Messenger just the other week, um, about, you were talking about finding the end of a poem, and I had a lot of that poem and I didn't have the end for,
Mm,
didn't just find the way to tie the two bits together, uh,
yeah.
the way
Yeah.
to dovetail them, uh,
Yeah.
and then you get it. So it doesn't always come in a one, but
Mm,
you kind of know when you've got something where you
yeah.
think there's
Yeah.
something that goes deeper. It's not, there's just something that goes deeper. And of course, I realized that thing too, that I realized, I was realizing that I had, Jenny mentioned about the age, and I realised I had become the older woman, although
Yeah.
the two
Yeah.
incidents were not very long between, but I had
No.
become the older woman as well.
Yeah. And so that common humanity is being passed down generation to generation. And what I'm also struck by in that poem is that, the slightest compliment that we get from a stranger stays with us forever.
Absolutely.
And it really does change lives, because here we are talking about,
Uh-huh.
two compliments way back whenever these incidents actually took place. And it's valuable.
Uh-huh. Yes.
That shared humanity, or just a quick I like your brooch, I like your hat,
Yes.
whatever it may be.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
I think the way at the moment, well, of course, we're not getting to mix as much, but also there is so much, the state capitalism is in at the moment. There's been so much grasping. There's so much of that side that we see. Sometimes we can feel a bit overwhelmed by it, and you have
Mm.
to remember, just that very small thing can mean so much. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's one of
exactly.
and it's one of the things poetry can do for us. It can remind us of that. We can encapsulate that in a poem.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the purposes of poetry. Sometimes it's very hard to articulate what a poem is for, but it's definitely for that, to remind us of our common humanity.